Learn English through story. Echoes of temptation. The evening air in the coastal town of Mirador carried a salty tang, mingling with the faint aroma of jasmine that clung to the narrow cobblestone streets. Mirador was a town of contrasts, a place where the old and new coexisted uneasily. Its quaint charm attracted tourists, but behind its idyllic facade lurked the tangled lives of its residents. At the heart of these lives lay a story of temptation, betrayal, and redemption. Isabel, a reserved and thoughtful writer in her mid-30s, had returned to her hometown of Mirador after a decade of living in the bustling chaos of the city. Seeking solace and inspiration for her next book, she rented a small house perched on the cliffs, where the waves below seemed to echo her restless thoughts. Isabel had a quiet strength, but she carried scars from an earlier life, a failed relationship, estranged family ties, and the gnawing doubt of whether she would ever find her true calling. Daniel, a successful gallery owner and artist, had lived in Mirador all his life, charismatic and charming. He was a man who could talk anyone into believing in his vision. He was married to Lena, a woman who, in her youth, had been as fiery and ambitious as he was. Over time, however, Lena had grown weary of the life they built together. Their once passionate marriage had become a delicate charade, held together by shared history and public appearances. Ava, Lena's younger sister, was a restless free spirit. She was fiercely intelligent and unapologetically bold, traits that made her both magnetic and dangerous. Ava had returned to Mirador unexpectedly after years of traveling, bringing with her a whirlwind of energy and unresolved tension. It began with a chance meeting. Isabel, wandering the town one afternoon, stumbled into Daniel's gallery. She was immediately drawn to a painting hanging in the corner, a stormy seascape that seemed to capture the turmoil she felt within. "That's one of mine," Daniel said, his voice smooth as he approached her. "You have good taste." Isabel smiled, though she felt a pang of self-consciousness under his gaze. "It's beautiful," she said, raw, honest. Daniel studied her for a moment, intrigued by her quiet intensity. "You're a writer, aren't you?" he asked. "How did you know?" He shrugged. "Call it intuition." What began as an innocent conversation soon turned into something more. Daniel invited Isabel to an art opening later that week, and though she hesitated, she found herself unable to resist. She was drawn to his confidence, his passion, and the way he seemed to see through her. But temptation rarely comes without cost. At the opening, Lena watched her husband from across the room. She noticed the way he leaned in when he spoke to Isabel, the way his eyes lingered on her a moment too long. A knot of unease settled in Lena's stomach, but she pushed it aside. After all, Daniel had always been charming. It was part of who he was. Still, as the weeks went on, Lena couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. He began spending more time at the gallery, claiming he was preparing for an important exhibit. When she asked about Isabel, he dismissed her concerns, but Lena wasn't convinced. Meanwhile, Ava had taken an interest in Isabel as well. The two women struck up an unlikely friendship, with Ava drawn to Isabel's introspective nature and Isabel fascinated by Ava's unapologetic confidence. Ava spoke candidly about her own struggles, her failed relationships, her feelings of inadequacy in comparison to her sister, and her constant search for something that felt real. "People always think they know what they want," Ava said one evening, the two of them sitting on Isabel's porch with glasses of wine. "But when they get it, they realize it wasn't what they needed." Isabel thought of Daniel, of the way her pulse quickened whenever he was near. She told herself it was harmless, but deep down, she knew she was playing with fire. One rainy evening, Isabel and Daniel found themselves alone in the gallery. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, and before either of them could stop it, they crossed a line. It was a moment of passion and weakness, one that left them both reeling. "I can't do this," Isabel said afterward, her voice trembling. "This isn't who I am." Daniel looked at her, his expression a mixture of guilt and longing. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, "but I can't stop thinking about you." Their affair continued in secret, each encounter more reckless than the last. Isabel felt herself spiraling, torn between her desire for Daniel and the crushing guilt of betraying Lena, a woman who had shown her nothing but kindness. Ava, ever perceptive, began to sense that something was amiss. She confronted Isabel one evening, her tone sharp but not unkind. "You're playing a dangerous game," Ava said, "and if you're not careful, it's going to destroy you." Isabel broke down, confessing everything. Ava listened silently, her expression unreadable. When Isabel finished, Ava took a deep breath and said, "You need to end it. Not just for Lena, but for yourself. This isn't love, it's a trap." The truth eventually came to light, as it always does. Lena discovered the affair and confronted Daniel in a moment of raw fury. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded. "To us?" Daniel had no answer. For all his charm and eloquence, he couldn't find the words to justify his actions. Lena left him that night, taking refuge with Ava. The sisters, who had always been at odds, found solace in each other's company. Ava, despite her own flaws, became a source of strength for Lena, encouraging her to rebuild her life on her own terms. Isabel, devastated by the pain she had caused, decided to leave Mirador. She packed her things and returned to the city, vowing to never let temptation dictate her actions again. She channeled her guilt and regret into her writing, creating a novel that explored the complexities of human desire and the consequences of betrayal. Years passed. Lena eventually found happiness again, opening her own art studio and reconnecting with her passions. Ava settled down in Mirador, finding peace in the stability she had always resisted. Daniel, humbled by his mistakes, dedicated himself to his art, using it as a way to process his guilt and seek redemption. His work became more honest, more vulnerable, and it resonated with audiences in a way it never had before. As for Isabel, her novel became a bestseller, praised for its raw honesty and emotional depth. She continued to write, using her experiences to explore themes of temptation, forgiveness, and the search for redemption. Echoes of Temptation is a story about the choices we make and the echoes they leave behind. It teaches us that 1. Temptation is a test of character. Yielding to it may bring temporary satisfaction, but it often comes at a great cost. 2. Honesty and accountability are crucial. Deception, no matter how well-intentioned, inevitably leads to pain. 3. Redemption is possible, but it requires effort and humility. We must confront our mistakes and learn from them to move forward. 4. True strength lies in resisting what is easy and pursuing what is right. The characters of Echoes of Temptation remind us that while we are all flawed, it is our ability to learn, grow, and seek redemption that defines us. The coastal town of Mirador was a place where the wind carried secrets, and the waves whispered of things left unsaid. It was a town steeped in tradition, but beneath its idyllic charm lay a tapestry of human frailty, ambition, and desire. Mirador's cliffs bore witness to countless stories, but none so poignant as that of Isabel, Daniel, Lena, and Ava, a tale of temptation, betrayal, and the enduring quest for redemption. Isabel stepped off the train with a small suitcase and a heart heavy with uncertainty. After years of city life, returning to Mirador felt both familiar and alien. The streets she had wandered as a child now seemed narrower, the houses closer together. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the cliffs, its vastness a reminder of how small and insignificant her troubles might be. The small house she rented sat at the edge of the town, perched precariously above the roaring waves. Its walls were painted a soft blue, faded by the sun, and its garden was wild with overgrown roses. Isabel found solace in its solitude, using the quiet to focus on her writing. She was working on her third novel, though the words came slower now. It was as if the part of her that had once been so certain of her voice had gone dormant, leaving her adrift. One afternoon, while walking through Mirador's bustling market square, Isabel came upon an art gallery tucked between a cafe and a bookstore. The sign above the door read Daniel's Gallery, and the display window featured a painting of a stormy sea, its waves crashing against jagged rocks. Drawn in by the painting's raw emotion, Isabel stepped inside. The gallery was quiet, its walls lined with canvases depicting scenes of Mirador, its cliffs, its harbors, its people. As she wandered, a voice broke the silence. "Caught in the storm, are you?" She turned to see a man in his 40s, his dark hair streaked with gray. He wore a tailored blazer over a casual shirt, his demeanor confident yet inviting. "I couldn't resist," Isabel admitted. "The painting, it feels alive." Daniel smiled. "That's one of mine. I painted it after a storm last year. Something about the chaos of nature always inspires me." Their conversation was brief, but it lingered with Isabel. There was something magnetic about Daniel and energy that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. Daniel returned home that evening to find Lena in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with precision. She greeted him with a smile, but there was a tension in the air, a weight that neither of them addressed. "How was the gallery?" Lena asked, her tone polite but distant. "Good," Daniel replied. "A woman came in today new to town, I think. She seemed interesting." Lena's knife paused mid-chop. "Interesting how?" Daniel shrugged, pouring himself a glass of wine. "Just someone who appreciates art, that's all." Lena said nothing, but her mind raced. She had learned long ago to recognize the subtle shifts in Daniel's behavior. The way his voice softened when he spoke of someone who intrigued him. The way his gaze seemed to linger on the thought of them. Their marriage had been built on passion, but over time, cracks had formed, and Lena often wondered if those cracks would ever mend or simply grow wider. Later that night, Lena lay awake beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling. She thought about their life together, the gallery, the parties, the endless cycle of creation and celebration. Somewhere along the way, she had lost herself in it all. The woman who had once been bold and ambitious now felt like a shadow of her former self, her identity tied to a man who was never fully hers. The day Ava returned to Mirador was marked by a thunderstorm that swept through the town, drenching everything in its path. She arrived unannounced, her car pulling into Lena and Daniel's driveway just as the rain began to fall. Lena opened the door to find her younger sister standing there, soaked but smiling. "Surprise," Ava said, holding out a bottle of wine as if it were a peace offering. Lena's initial reaction was a mix of irritation and relief. Ava had always been the unpredictable one, the wild card who showed up when least expected and left just as abruptly. "You could have called," Lena said, stepping aside to let her in, "and ruined the drama of my grand entrance," Ava teased, shaking off her wet coat. Despite their differences, the sisters fell into an easy rhythm that evening. They drank wine, reminisced about their childhood, and avoided the topics that might lead to conflict. But as the days went on, Ava began to sense the underlying tension in Lena's life. She noticed the way Lena's smile faltered when Daniel was mentioned, the way she avoided certain topics. Ava, never one to shy away from uncomfortable truths, decided to investigate further. Daniel and Isabel's connection deepened over time. What began as casual conversations in the gallery turned into long walks along the cliffs. Their discussions, ranging from art to philosophy, to their shared sense of restlessness. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, Daniel confessed, "Sometimes, I feel like I'm living someone else's life, like I've built this perfect picture, but it doesn't feel real anymore." Isabel hesitated, torn between her empathy for him and the growing feelings she couldn't ignore. "Maybe it's time to repaint the picture," she said softly. Their affair began that night. It was a moment of passion, fueled by longing and the illusion that they could find in each other what they felt was missing in their lives. But the weight of their actions quickly became apparent. Isabel was consumed by guilt, her writing, suffering as a result. Daniel became more distant at home, his absences growing longer and harder to explain. It was Ava who eventually uncovered the truth. She saw the way Daniel looked at Isabel during one of her gallery visits, the way Isabel's demeanor changed whenever his name was mentioned. Confronting Isabel, Ava demanded to know the truth. Isabel broke down, confessing everything. "Ava," despite her anger, decided to take matters into her own hands. Ava confronted Daniel late one evening, catching him as he left the gallery. "You're playing with fire," she said, her voice cold, "and you're going to get burned." Daniel tried to dismiss her, but Ava's words struck a nerve. She didn't mince words, laying bare the damage he was causing not just to Lena, but to Isabel as well. The confrontation forced Daniel to confront his own actions. He realized he had been using Isabel as an escape, a way to avoid dealing with the cracks in his marriage and the dissatisfaction in his life. Meanwhile, Ava told Lena everything. The revelation shattered Lena, but it also gave her a sense of clarity. For too long, she had been living in denial, holding on to a marriage that no longer served either of them. Lena left Daniel, moving in with Ava temporarily while she rebuilt her life. Isabel, overwhelmed by the pain she had caused, decided to leave Mirador. She returned to the city, dedicating herself to her writing and seeking to make amends through her work. Daniel, humbled by the fallout, began to confront the flaws in himself that had led to his actions. He threw himself into his art, creating pieces that were raw and honest, reflecting his journey toward self-awareness. Ava and Lena grew closer, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. Together, they found healing and a renewed sense of purpose. Echoes of Temptation is a story about the choices we make and the consequences they carry. It teaches us that temptation is fleeting, but its impact can be lasting. True fulfillment comes from facing our struggles, not escaping them. Honesty and accountability are essential for growth. Deception, no matter how small, erodes trust and relationships. Healing is possible, but it requires courage and self-reflection. Redemption comes from acknowledging our flaws and striving to be better. The characters of Echoes of Temptation remind us that while we are all imperfect, we have the power to choose a path of integrity and redemption. Mirador held secrets. For centuries, it had drawn wanderers, dreamers, and those seeking refuge from their pasts. Its cliffs had seen countless lovers' quarrels, reconciliations, and promises unkept. Beneath the waves, locals whispered, lay shipwrecks and treasures, claimed by the sea, metaphors for the broken lives and hidden desires of those who called this place home. Daniel's family had lived in Mirador for generations. His gallery was a modern addition to the otherwise traditional town, a place where art collided with reality. Lena had grown up to towns over, marrying Daniel in what felt like a whirlwind romance. Ava had always been the rebellious one, a firebrand who loved the town but couldn't stay tethered to it. Isabel, though a returnee, was a stranger in many ways. Each of these people carried the weight of their own histories, their choices intertwining like threads in a tapestry. Daniel had once been an idealist. As a young artist, he believed in the transformative power of creation. He painted with reckless abandon, unafraid to explore the darkest corners of his mind. But success changed him. His gallery became more about pleasing patrons than pushing boundaries. The stormy sea painting that captivated Isabel was a rare exception, born from a moment of unfiltered emotion during a crisis in his marriage. Daniel's marriage to Lena began with passion, but devolved into a series of compromises. They built their life around shared goals, the gallery, a home filled with art and laughter. But the cracks began to show when Daniel's ambition outpaced their intimacy. Lena tried to hold on, but her attempts often felt like trying to catch a wave with her hands. Lena was once the life of every gathering. Her laughter could fill a room, and her wit could disarm even the most stoic of critics. But over the years, she felt herself fading. She became the steady foundation beneath Daniel's brilliance. But in doing so, she lost her own spark. She blamed herself for their distance, believing that if she could just reignite the fire within her, Daniel might look at her the way he used to. Ava had spent her life running not just from Mirador, but from the expectations placed on her as Lena's younger sister. Lena had always been the golden child, the responsible one, while Ava was the risk-taker, the one who defied convention. She traveled the world, seeking adventure. But her restlessness masked a deep fear. the fear of being ordinary, of being tied down, of losing her freedom. Isabel's decision to return to Mirador was born out of desperation. Her life in the city had been a series of missteps, an abusive relationship she barely escaped, a career that seemed to plateau, and a lingering sense of unfulfilled potential. Mirador represented a chance to start over, to reconnect with her roots, and to find the inspiration she had lost. The affair between Daniel and Isabel was not born from malice, but from weakness. Their conversations grew longer, their shared moments more intimate. For Isabel, Daniel represented a validation she hadn't felt in years. For Daniel, Isabel was a reminder of the person he once was, the artist who created for himself, not for others. But temptation does not exist in a vacuum. Every stolen moment cast a shadow over their lives. Lena sensed Daniel's growing distance, though she couldn't pinpoint its cause. Ava, always perceptive, noticed Isabel's guarded demeanor and Daniel's sudden bursts of inspiration. One evening, as Daniel and Isabel stood on the cliffs, watching the waves crash below, Isabel asked, "Do you ever feel like the sea is calling you? Like it knows your secrets?" Daniel nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I think the sea knows me better than anyone else." Their shared vulnerability brought them closer, but it also deepened their guilt. Isabel, torn between her feelings for Daniel and her loyalty to Lena, began to withdraw. Ava's return to Mirador marked a shift in the delicate balance of their lives. Unlike Lena, Ava was unafraid to confront uncomfortable truths. She saw through Daniel's charm and Isabel's quiet demeanor, piecing together the puzzle with unsettling clarity. One evening, Ava cornered Isabel at the local cafe. "You're in over your head," Ava said bluntly. Isabel's hands trembled as she clutched her coffee cup. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ava leaned in, her eyes piercing. "Don't play coy with me. I've seen the way you look at Daniel and the way he looks at you." Isabel felt the weight of Ava's words, her guilt threatening to consume her. "It's not what you think," she murmured. Ava's laugh was bitter. "It never is. But trust me, whatever you're chasing, it's not worth destroying lives over." The truth came to light in the most dramatic fashion: a confrontation at the gallery during an exhibit opening. Lena, armed with Ava's suspicions and her own intuition, confronted Daniel in front of a small crowd. "You've been lying to me," she said, her voice steady but filled with hurt. Daniel tried to deflect, but Lena's accusations cut through his defenses. Isabel, who had come to the exhibit hoping to avoid Daniel, found herself caught in the crossfire. The fallout was swift and devastating. Lena left Daniel that night, taking refuge with Ava. Isabel, unable to face the town's judgment, packed her belongings and disappeared without a word. For Daniel, the aftermath of the affair was a reckoning. He closed the gallery for months, retreating into his art. His new works were raw and unpolished, reflecting the chaos and guilt he felt within. These paintings, though painful, marked the beginning of his redemption. Lena, with Ava's support, found the courage to rebuild her life. She opened her own studio, creating art that celebrated resilience and self-discovery. Her journey became an inspiration to others in Mirador, especially women who had felt silenced or overshadowed. Isabel, living in a small apartment in the city, poured her pain into her writing. Her novel, Echoes of Temptation, became a bestseller, lauded for its unflinching exploration of human frailty and the path to redemption. Years later, Isabel returned to Mirador for a book signing. There she encountered Lena, who had come to the event out of curiosity. Their conversation was tentative at first, but it ended with mutual understanding. "I'm sorry," Isabel said, her voice breaking. Lena nodded, tears in her eyes. "I've forgiven you, but more importantly, I've forgiven myself." Temptation reveals who we are, but it doesn't define us. Our choices in the aftermath determine our true character. Healing requires honesty, accountability, and time. Running from pain only prolongs the journey to peace. True strength lies in facing our flaws and striving to grow. Redemption is not about erasing the past, but learning from it. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoy, then please like and share this video. And don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel.